Okay. What's your favorite season? Mine is summer. Just kidding. Look, that was it. I just wanted to make one last Frozen reference. That was one trick pony. That's all I am. So let's go into the Bible right now. In the first book of Kings, so we just heard the story. I built my Bible over here. In the first book of Kings, it tells the story of this king. What's his name? Solomon. Is Solomon an old guy or a young guy? He's a young guy. So he's starting out, and he knows that he doesn't know, right? He knows that what he's called to do, he doesn't have what he needs to have to be able to do it. And so, again, you heard the story, recap, is God says, okay, Solomon, I'm willing to give you what you need to have in order to do what you need to do. And Solomon asks, he asks for wisdom, and God says, you're blessed with this. Absolutely, that's the best answer. Awesome, you got it. And Solomon gets the ability to know right from wrong. He has what he needs to have in order to do what he needs to do. And he has an incredible beginning of a story. I mean, think of how like the deck is stacked in Solomon's favor so powerfully. Not only is his dad the king, not only is he raised in the palace, not only does God know his name, and he knows God's name, but he also is given these gifts of being able to be a great king. And that's the crazy thing, is Solomon had everything he needed in order to be the king that he needed to be. He had everything that he needed in order to be the kind of king the people needed to have. The problem is this: Solomon's story starts out great, and Solomon's story ends up terribly. Solomon has a great start. He has a lousy finish. Solomon is not a hero of the Bible. Solomon is a failure. The guy we just heard about in the Bible today, he started out with the potential to be a hero, and he died as a villain. He died as a failure because he knew what he needed to do, and he didn't do what he needed to do. He had the wisdom that he needed to have in order to do what he needed to do, but he wasn't willing to do it. What happened to him? It wasn't that he forgot everything. It was this. It says later on in Solomon's life, he got really rich, he got really comfortable. And some of that comfort, some of that richness, it shifted his, I spit on you, he shifted his priorities from doing what he needed to do to kind of just doing what he wanted to do. It shifted his priorities from like being the man that they needed him to be kind of the guy he just wanted to be. And it kind of blurred his vision. Another thing happened is that Solomon had roughly 300 wives and 700 concubines. I don't think you were setting your household up for like success when you do that kind of thing. And one of the reasons is because you shouldn't do that. But the other reason is this, is because what happened was Solomon, who knew God's name and God knew Solomon's name, his heart turned to other gods. He knew what the great prize was, and the great prize was a life with God. The great prize was the fact that God knew him and he knew God. But then what happened was he let other gods compete for God's role. He knew his priority, and then his priority just slipped. Just started getting encroached out and started getting like edged out. Solomon had everything that he needed to have in order to be the man he needed to be, but instead he just did what he wanted to do so that he could be the kind of guy he wanted to be. And the crazy thing is this: he has a great start, he has a terrible finish. This is the last thing we're doing before we leave. And I know that if you've ever been on a retreat, if you've ever been on this kind of conference before, you know what people talk about. They talk about the retreat high. Have you ever heard that phrase, the retreat high? This is kind of a familiar thing. What it is, the idea is this, is that when I was on the retreat, when I was at the conference, I was firing on all cylinders. It was great. I was just thriving. Had joy. I had love. I had peace. I was able to pray, all these kind of things. And then what happened is I got home and it just kind of like, this went away. And sometimes we have the thought, sometimes we fall into the trap of thinking that's how it's supposed to be. How it's supposed to be is that you go away on the retreat or the conference, but then you come back and it's supposed to die away in the sense of this. You're supposed to just go back to your old life. And what we start thinking is this: well, what happened at the retreat, what happened at the conference, it wasn't really real. But I want to argue that. I would say that you have the ability, if you want it, you have the ability to actually keep what you have now going. I'm not talking about all the emotions. Emotions come and go, they go up and down. I'm hungry, I'm not. I'm angry, I'm not. I'm on fire with the Lord, I'm just kind of like bored. That's just emotions. I'm talking about joy. I'm talking about like actually being someone who's convicted and rooted in the truth of God. Here's what happens. We're here at this conference. You're in an oxygen-rich environment, right? Like all the things that normally like stifle your faith and stifle your joy, they're probably not here. Unless you're dating them and they're sitting next to you. But like other than that, but the idea really truly is this, is a lot of the things that get in the way, that like trip you up, they haven't been here this weekend. And so what's that mean? That means you're in an oxygen-rich environment. That means you've had the freedom to then be fed. And to actually have the fuel that you need in order to grow. And so a lot of times what happens is this. It's like this. We have this candle, right? This is your faith. It's wonderful, beautiful. This is your faith, right? So it's able to continue to burn because it's in an oxygen-rich environment. It has exactly what it needs to have. It has none of what it doesn't need to have. There's even like protection around here to keep it from being blown out, this candle from being blown out. So there's things that are not there, and then what it needs to keep burning is there. So the problem is this. What we do sometimes is we go back home and we don't blow out the candle right away. Although I know people who on Sunday night, they crash and burn that night. I've been that person who's come back from retreat and I'm like, I love God so much, and I've crashed and burned hours after I got home. I know what that's like, but a lot of times what happens to us is this. We don't really blow out the candle or douse it with water. What we do is we kind of just put something over it. And it can still burn for a while, but it gets weaker and weaker. And we start saying, look, I'm going to bring some of those things back into my life because I can't, because I'm not willing to actually make a change. We say, and I'm going to stop feeding what I need the fire to have in order to keep burning because, I don't know, it's going to keep burning. And what happens is we put something over the flame, and it doesn't go out right away, but we starve it to death. And we had everything we needed to have in order to be the person we needed to be, but instead of choosing to do that, what we did was we said, well, I'll just kind of do what I want in order so I can be the kind of guy I want or gal I want. And what ends up happening is we take our flame of faith from being in an oxygen-rich environment and we put it in an oxygen-deficient environment. Here's what I mean. There's this guy, one of our students, just such a stud. He's a great man. Whenever he's on point, whenever he's not smoking weed, whenever he's not looking at porn, whenever he's not messing around with all his friends and stuff, the guy is I'm like, dude, you're gonna be a saint. This guy is and he's also not just doing well, he's joyful. He has this kind of sense about himself. He walks into a room and people are like, this guy is amazing, and everyone just gets drawn to him. But what happens is this, regularly is this. He knows the truth. In fact, he helps out with our theology of the body retreats type things. And he's like, I know this is true. I love this. It brings me so much joy. But then he starts hanging out with one of his cousins. And this cousin doesn't like to do anything other than smoke the ganja, as they say. And so what he does is he starts smoking doobies with his brothers. And then that leads to him living a different life. Not right away. He's like, no, I'm just going to a couple joints. Not a big deal. But then what happens is okay, I'm going to go on the internet. I'm going to look at what I shouldn't be looking at. You know what happens? The lion comes along and so then the whole thing is, here's this guy who knows the truth, and he knows what he needs to know in order to be the man he needs to be. But what he does is he continues to go back and put things in his life that just suck out faith. So what we need to do is two things. The first thing is this. We need to create the proper environment for faith. What that means is some things have got to go. You might have heard of a guy named Steve Jobs, right? I think he lived out in this state of California. Steve Jobs, founder of Apple Computers. At one point, Apple Computers, which is just, everyone knows about Apple, so I don't have to go into it. But Apple Computers, at one point, Steve Jobs was fired, and they brought him back. And Apple was floundering. It was failing. And they said, Steve Jobs, come back, tell us what we need to do. And he said, first, before I tell you what you need to do, I'm going to tell you what you need to stop doing. What you need to stop doing is everything. And what we're going to do at Apple Computers is we're going to focus on 4 things, and that's it. Because what we're doing is we're working on this. We're trying to compete with everyone else, trying to do what everyone else is doing. And Steve Jobs said, listen, no, that is everyone else. We're going to do only 4 things. And he drew this quadrant on a whiteboard. He said, we're doing this, and this. If anything we do doesn't fall into these categories, we're not doing it. The most important thing that got Apple back on track was not what they did, it was what they decided to not do. Why? Because they're creating an environment in which they can do what they need to do. And the crazy thing is this, if you are willing to do what you need to do when you need to do it, their day will come when you're able to do what you want to do when you want to do it. Steve Jobs, we're only focusing on these things, so we're not doing all these other things. He created an oxygen-rich environment, a success potential-rich environment. So the question I have for you is this, is what things will you need to say, this actually can't be part of my life starting tonight? I have to just make a change. And I'm not saying that everyone has to be the same thing. What I'm saying is this, what is it that's in my life that I know actually kills my faith? What do I know is not the person next to you, the person who you are. What is in your life that you know if you keep it in your life, it will kill your faith? Not all at once, but ultimately it will just make you weaker and weaker until that flame just goes out. Are you willing? Are you willing to part with that thing? Are you willing to create that environment? Now, someone would say, well, I don't know, it's just too hard. It's just too hard. The reality is this, Saint Jesus. Jesus, text today, Jesus talks about the pearl of great price and the person who's willing to give away everything in order to get that pearl of great price. Because why? Because that pearl of great price is my priority. It matters to me. And if something matters to you, you'll make a way. And if it doesn't matter to you, you'll make an excuse. If something matters to you, if your faith, the faith you have right now, if that matters to you, and you have to you realize I have to cut this one thing out of my life, then you'll make a way. But if it really doesn't matter to you, what's going to happen is you're going to make an excuse. I have a good friend. I worked with her on campus at the university, and she worked with me. At one point, she lived in Thailand. She was vacationing for like 6 to 8 weeks in Thailand. And at one point, she spent a number of weeks on this island off the coast of Thailand. On this island, there were no Catholic churches. And so she got to this island, and she said, well, no Catholic churches. I guess I can't make it to Sunday Mass. Kind of like, oh, well, I can't make it there because she said the closest Mass was I'd have to get up at 3 in the morning or 4 in the morning, take a ferry across the way to the mainland, then take a bus another 2 hours, so a ferry that lasts 1 or 2 hours, a bus that lasts 2 hours, and that's the closest Catholic Mass. So I guess I just can't make it to Mass. Because it'd be like getting up at 4, taking this ferry, taking this bus, and then the same trip back home. I guess I can't make it. And then she realized, I can make it, I just don't want to. She said, she's a climber, rock climber. She's like, no, if we were going on a rock climbing trip, I would get up at 4, I would take the ferry, I'd take the bus, I'd get to the place. It'd be no problem. Because if something matters to you, you'll make a way. And if it doesn't matter to you, you'll make an excuse. She realized she was convicted. I'm just making excuses. So the whole time she was on this island, 4 in the morning, 3 in the morning, she'd get up, get on the ferry, get on the bus, go to Mass. Why? Because it mattered to her. She's the kind of thing like, what are the decisions I need to do now? Making the choices she needs to make when she needed to make them. So she could become that kind of person that she knew she was called to be. Because that's the truth. Right now, you guys, if it matters to you, you'll make a way. And if it doesn't matter to you, you will make an excuse. So what's the environment? What's the thing you need to clear out of the way? So the thing that would stifle your faith. The second thing is this. What do you need? What kind of fuel do you need to feed on? What kind of fuel will your faith need? Like what kind of thing will actually fuel your faith? It is prayer. It might be the other things we talked about. Service, community, the scriptures. In fact, there's this I had these junior high kids, middle school kids, 6th and 7th graders, a number of years ago. We have this middle school retreat that I'm helping out with our diocese next week. And we're coming back, and it's so great because at one point there's this kid, his name is Ben Hadrich, now he's a priest, Father Ben Hadrich. Father Ben talked to these middle schoolers in 6th and 7th grade a number of years ago, and he said this, he said, you guys, I read my Bible every day, 15 minutes a day. He says, some nights I'll come home at 3 in the morning. I'm like, okay, 15 minutes. I'll fall asleep and wake up with my head on the Bible. But I made a decision. I'm going to read my Bible every single day because he said that's what grows my faith. That's the kind of fuel that I need if I want to hold on to the kind of faith that I need. So these kids, he challenged me. He said, I challenge you, 6th and 7th grade, to read your Bible 15 minutes every single day. Those students are now juniors and seniors in college, and there's this group of like 20 or 30 of them who have read their Bible almost every day for the last, whatever, I don't know, I'm not good at math. What, 8 years? Is that more than that? I'm not good at math, seriously. Yeah, 8 to 10 years, we'll say that. 8 to 10 years. Among these groups of people, we have some missionaries who are domestic. They stay here and they work missions. We have some missionaries in college even. They've dropped out at certain points, taken a break to go overseas to be missionaries. We have some people who are now in the seminary. We have others who are preparing to get married. We have this one girl. She read her Bible every day, just like Father Ben told her. 15 minutes a day. She was recently published in this periodical called the Pastoral and Homiletic Review. My brother priest, we know what that is. It's basically a publication that's written for priests. So here is this junior in college who wrote an article on the life of John Paul II that's only going to be read by priests and deacons and bishops. So here's this junior in high school who's teaching deacons, priests, and bishops. Because why? It all started when she was in 6th grade, and this guy said, hey, you should do 15 minutes a day. 15 minutes a day is no big deal. 15 minutes a day, and it changed her life. Why? Because that's the fuel that she absolutely needed. You've heard of a guy named Steve Martin? Steve Martin is a comedian. He's hilarious. I love this guy. Steve Martin, you might know, he's an incredible comedian. He's a great writer. He's a great actor. But you might not know that Steve Martin's also a Grammy-winning banjo player. Do you know he's won awards of Grammy? Is that right? That's music, right? Grammy, yeah. So, like, we live in California. We know all these things. I'm from Minnesota. We've got gophers. So, Steve Martin has won these awards for his banjo playing, but when he was 17, he didn't know how to play a banjo. And he just like, I want to be a great banjo player, but I don't know how to play a banjo. And he just told himself, he said, you know, but if I play a little bit every day, in 20 years, I'll be pretty good. And that was how he started. He said, well, if I don't know how to play the banjo right now, but if I just do a little bit every day, in 20 years, I could be pretty good. And in 20 years, he was amazing. I don't know how to pray. I don't know how to read my Bible. But I bet if I just did a little bit every day, in 20 years, what would my life look like? And this question, you might not pray very often right now, but if you did a little bit every day, in 20 years, what would your life look like? What would your life be like? What kind of person would you be if every day for the next 20 years, you were a man or woman of prayer and you made a way? Because it was a priority, so you made a way, didn't make an excuse. That's what I'm talking about, is this whole thing. Growth is a choice. The grace that Chris told us earlier, grace has been given to us. So if we're going to grow, if you want it, you can. If you don't want it, you don't have to. That's it. If you want to go from here and take the little flame that the Lord gave you and make it into a raging inferno, that's your choice. If you want to take the little flame God gave you, want to keep it a little flame, that's your choice. If you want to have a small life, it's your life. No one's going to make that decision for you. But if you want to have a life that not only transforms you, but transforms the people around you and transforms this world, that's going to mean you make the choice to do the things you need to do when you need to do them in order to be the kind of person you want to be. And more importantly, that God wants you to be. Here's the last thing. So 2 things, I said. One is clear the way. What do you need to trim out of your life, right, to make space for grace? The second thing is, what kind of fuel are you going to choose? So I invite you to do this. Make a decision before you leave Mass today. Make a decision maybe on the bus ride home. Make a decision. Here's the one thing I need to make some space for grace. Here's the other thing I need, the fuel I need, because it's going to feed me. But here's the thing. What's going to happen is this. You're going to fail. Wah, wah. Like, you're going to fail. That's how it's going to go. The hardest day to pray is the day after the day you forget to pray. The hardest day to go before the Lord is the day after you fall. I got to tell you right now, just be prepared. You're going to fail. That's okay. That's what happens. That's why God gave us confession. That's why He loves you so much. This last thing is, have you ever seen the TV show 24? The TV show 24, right? So Jack Bauer is this like super stud of the world, and Jack Bauer has this whole thing where the whole show is like, right, he's stopping terrorists. Like every episode, every hour on the hour, he's stopping another terrorist, here's a bomb over here, there's a hijacking over here. But Jack Bauer, even though he's trying to put out this fire and trying to put out this thing, the big question of the entire series is this. When it comes to the terrorists, what is their end game? Like, yep, there's a hostage over here. Yes, there's a bomb over here. But what do they ultimately want? I'm going to tell you, there's a terrorist out there. First Peter writes about it. First Peter writes about it, and he says this. He says, your opponent, the devil, is prowling like a roaring lion. Your opponent, the devil, is prowling like a roaring lion, looking for someone to devour. Resist him, steadfast in faith. What's the devil's end game? He's the terrorist. The devil's just a terrorist. He's a bully. What's the devil's end game for your life? It's not to get you to fall. It's to get you to fall and stay falled. I just made a new word. Deal with it. What's the devil's end game? If you struggle with purity, the devil's end game is not to get you to fall into impurity. He's to get you to fall there and then be so disgusted with yourself you don't try to get back up. If you struggle with anger, the devil's not trying to get you to fall into anger. He's trying to get you to fall into anger and then be so frustrated that you stay down. If you struggle with anything, I don't care what it is, the devil's end game is not that thing. The devil's end game is to get you to the place where you just give up. I'm going to say this to everyone here. You do not have permission to give up. You don't have permission to quit. I'm not giving it to you. You do not have permission to give up when you fail. You do not have permission to give up when you fall. You do not have permission to give up when you sin. I'm not giving it to you, and the Lord does not give you permission to quit. So there's two questions. I'm going to try to get it out of my life, and I might fail at that. Okay, don't give up. I'm going to try to feed my faith. I'm going to try to bring stuff into my life that's good, and I might fail at that. Okay, it's okay. Don't give up. Don't quit. Because God is faithful. He's given you a great start. He wants to give you a great ending. To do what you need to do, when you need to do it. So you can be the person that you want to be. And that God wants you to be with him.